Today's fun project is a 2012, I believe, Porsche Cayenne. It's got a 4.8 V8, and the customer brought it to me, wanted me to look it over. It runs rough at idle. Seems to be okay, I guess, off idle and driving. Just rough running at idle, and wants me to check it over. Haven't messed with too many of these. It does have a check engine light. Currently, right now, there's a code for a 303 style misfire number 3. And if you pull up on live data, it was showing number 3 misfiring. So what I quickly did before I decided to turn the camera on is just go quick, easy. I moved the coil from number 3 over to number 1, and being that I could see it on the live data, I figured it'd be the quickest, easiest thing to see if the misfire moves. If so, we know we've got a coil issue, and for the misfire, which it does run a little rough right now. A little bit of a pain to get to the coil. There's a little cover that goes over the coils themselves, which went underneath this. So in order just to get that cover off, you've got to undo this mount deal to be able to get to it. So that was a little bit annoying, but I guess what do you expect? But the other thing that I noticed that, again off camera, is it sounds just like any other vehicle that's got a bad crankcase situation where you've got too much vacuum. And actually what I'll do, this is my little adapter deal, but which it surprisingly does fit as far as being the same as BMW. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I have no idea what the crankcase pressure should be while running on a vehicle like this. Like I said, I haven't done actually any of these on the 4.8, but it just sounds like almost all that I've experienced that have a bad valve like these, which this was the original one. Okay, so I'm gonna get this started up and let it run. I'll let you before I do so, let me see if I can pull up the live data. Going to misfires. And number 3 is still counting up. Coil made no difference. So there's that as far as actual supposed misfire, which, you know, it is. You can feel it. A little bit rough, but take a listen to this. Gets sucked down in there. I mean, actually, that's in other vehicles. That's just the think it's way too much vacuum in the crankcase. Basically, you're connecting your manifold vacuum directly into your crankcase, pull in too much vacuum, causing, and it can cause, random misfires and run rough at idle, multiple things. But the weird thing is, like I said, it's a second one. That's a factory piece I got on there. This is the original diaphragm from the original assembly, and this one actually didn't have a tear in it, which is what you would tend to see is when the diaphragm tears. That's where you get your connection between manifold and crankcase. So, I thought that was going to take care of the great high levels of vacuum in the crankcase. Like I said, that's just, it takes some force. It's sucking it down. That's pretty bad. So I'm going to go ahead and get an actual measurement with my scope as far as what it's pulling in the crankcase. I still haven't messed with I'm probably just going to go ahead and swap the coil, the spark plug now, just to see, try not to get too crazy and technical, especially when we have live data actually reporting. So, but right now I'm concerned with trying to get a reading on the crankcase levels. That's a lot of vacuum. It's almost 2.7 inches. Normally it'd be, it's definitely under 1. Being the, I don't know, 0.7 maybe sometimes. I'd have to look up just for comparison, but that's a lot of vacuum. Like I say, that's the first one I've seen, and that is just a whole lot of vacuum. I'm not sure they're supposed to pull that much. Like I said, I don't know if I'm chasing one problem or two problems, because the misfire situations can definitely be caused by bad crankcase situations, but being that it's like an isolated to cylinder 3 makes me think that there is a dedicated misfire situation there. And like I said, I don't know if then the crankcase is supposed to be pulling that much, which I'd be very wary or skeptical. Like I said, I'll have to do some digging and investigations, try to see if I could find a spec or a figure. I'm definitely not going to go out in the parking lot and find the second one just to take a measurement in it, because it's not an everyday car, so that part about it sucks. But right now, being that I already got a measurement in the crankcase vacuum, obviously, it's a high reading. I'm going to go ahead and concentrate on this, seeing if we can isolate it to a spark plug and take care of that situation, and then see how it runs after that. I'll just do that. Rectify the dedicated misfire and then kind of see how it runs. Just for for playing around. Let me see if there's okay, it's still the same 303. Most of the time, from my experience, you know, especially German vehicles, if you've got a crankcase situation, you know, that's not correct, you'll almost right away get fuel mixture codes, whether it's your generic 171, 174 lean, or a dedicated, you know, OEM style fuel trim or mixture fault. Which when they came in, they never had a mixture fault code, and right now it's not logging one. So like again, it's very hard to comprehend if that is the levels that they want to run at. I'm just trying to think in my head, and that high crankcase just, it's not sitting well with me, so I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to turn into something dumb, but let's take care of the misfire, get that over with. And it even, I don't know if you caught that, and that's what, it's got a squeak, and this is, like I said, it's bothering me, is from experience. They'll start to squeal. I don't know if they can pick that up, but it should go away when I open this. Or not. So hard to tell. I'm going to, I've got an idea. Again, I'm just experimenting at this point. We know what our measurement is here. Okay. So it's in the 2 and change, 2.64 inches that we're getting in the crankcase. Obviously, in the crankcase here, it's going to get its vacuum source from this line directly. You've got the diaphragm, then it connects into the valve cover here through that open port. I believe that's the drain. So, and then the back hose, the back inlet right there, is just a connection to the other bank breather, basically. So it collects from here for this bank, collects from here for this bank. It'll drain there, and then vapor-wise, after oil separated, vapor-wise, it's supposed to come in here, drawn in by vacuum. We got high vacuum in there. I am going to remove. We got high vacuum, and we got an amount that we measured. I'm going to remove this. Take a measurement of the actual manifold vacuum with the scope in this port, and see what the difference is there. Okay, so we've got this sealed back off. I've got a little adapter deal that I made that fits in there. I just used it's just a regular fitting, some electrical tape to take up some room and kind of be squishy to take up and seal up a little bit of space, and then just fitting into the transducer, and then we will start up, see if we get that same equal amount. And we know we have direct connection or if, different reading. Okay, so that's off the scale. Alright. Why is it still squeaking? It's weird. Okay, so no vacuum. But that squeaking still there, that's odd. Maybe it's not from the diaphragm deal. Sure if it's the belt. Don't sound to be like it. Alright, so direct connection in the manifold, just under 20 inches. So we're not directly pulling all the vacuum into the crankcase. Main thing I wanted to see. So there is a restricted connection. I'll stop here with the crankcase deal, and I'm going to go ahead and swap out these spark plugs. Okay, so at this point, not too sure where I left off yesterday, last night, but what I decided to do was to start checking mechanical condition, because particularly with this bank 1, cylinders number 3 misfire kept counting, and coil and plug swapping did not make any difference as far as on the scan tool. Still showing number 3, and every once in a while number 2 would pop up. And so this morning came in, just decided to stop messing with the breather valve right now and checking the mechanical condition of the engine with the scope. First thing I did was relative compression. I had it synced to number 1 and checking the battery draw, and I cranked it over, and it was cranking normal, and towards the end of it, it started to become oddball number of hits. So it stopped, and it times out because it's a electronic style controlled starter. So I went ahead and cranked it again, and it stayed in that like hiccup mode when you have dead holes as far as compression goes, where the audible sound of the starter and the compression build-up hums sort of become uneven. So what I decided to do was start to check the manifold with the transducer, check the intake pulls, and I'm also in cylinder number 3, check to see what that's looking like. Along with, I'm still traced for reference on ignition 1, and I do still have the current probe for the relative compression to still look at the rest of cylinders. And as I was saying, once it started to sound uneven, I pulled up the graph, and all of bank 1 compression humps were lower than all of bank 2, which it kind of freaked me out at first, because on the first initial crank, all humps were even, and all of a sudden just dropped out to a lower reading on bank 1. Now, like I said, I continued from then on checking, and it'll start off quick, like high buildup, and drop off almost right away after a revolution or two of cranking, and bank 1 will drop out or just get lower readings. So kind of funky, but definitely looking like a mechanical situation on this side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank it and show you what I'm talking about, what I'm seeing, and let you guys see. Like I said, I've done a few already. Wanted to get some on camera to get this all caught up, and I can show you on the screen. So alright, so that's started. I don't know if you can catch any. So, I don't know if you can pick it up audibly, how it's uneven cranking humps. Let me back out. And there on the bottom, you can see on this revolution almost all cylinders are almost even. This one's already low, which is number 3, and then by the next revolution, here's this red trace is ignition 1. Cylinder 1's already low, cylinder 3 is low. The next one is high, low, high, high, low, high, low, low. So it starts to drop out, and all of bank 1, according to firing order, are the ones that are low here on the screen. Then another sign of that is on your expansion pull during cranking. And this is, it gets capped off. My scales are not set right, but what I can tell, and you can definitely tell the bleed off, is this expansion pocket, my bad, is what would be considered quote unquote normal, where it doesn't pull as low. But once you've got a bleed off, then you'll have a deeper pull on your expansion, which is an indication of a loss of volume in the cylinder, which would account for that. Now also, intake pulls, here you can see there's decent amount of humps, but then it flattens out further along, which would match a mechanical situation. Okay, you've got, I'm not zoomed in as much as I need to, but you can see a continuous humps. Not great, but here already, 720 to 720, there's already mechanical loss, uneven humps or pulls, intake pulls, which at this point you're getting into mechanical situation. as well as what you're seeing here. The oddball thing is, once you crank it and let it run, it'll run, like I said, sort of decent. Definitely within a misfire that you can feel, and it shows up very high on number 3. I'm not 100% what's going on when cranking and why this whole bank drops out as far as intake ability to, looks like, pull air and build compression. The only thing I know related to that is it does have variable intake control with a phaser, which would, advance or retard the intake cam. And then here is the solenoid. That can obviously come into play with come and go intake situation physically. Now I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get to dive too much deeper. I kind of spoke to the customer this morning about possible mechanical situations, and I told him that I'll go as far as I can with what I can without, getting too crazy as far as intrusive style testing, which, at that point, who knows, pulling intakes and stuff like that, valve covers. But with what I can probe and look at and stuff like that, it's looking like mechanical. And like I was saying, he was once he heard that, he was just on the point that he's not going to go any further and probably just look to do something different with the vehicle. So at this point, I think the last thing that I can do is plug all these guys back in, get it to run, and do running compression waveform and see what that looks like while running. But there is something, that's probably not going to be easy fix going on here. So let me set up for the running, because I've got to switch transducers, get the scale right, and go from there. I'm going to do another cranking compression, switch the scales a little, see if I can show you on the screen. And there you get a better view of the yellow trace. Initially, you'll get high compression build, not as deep of a pocket here, and once it starts to, see how both banks are decent. Once it begins to drop out and stays at the lower state, these expansion pockets get bigger, and then you lose bank 1. So that's what's going on. And like I said, intake pulls here look decent. Let me see if I can you're having some form of pulls, you're seeing them. Probably not the greatest, but definitely better than what it turns into. Which then goes into that. So definitely something related to mechanical or mechanical control, probably more like it. And like I said, clearly see the quick buildup while it's in good state, and then how it drops out. And the thing about it, it stays pretty consistent or steady. So it must move it to a certain position and stay there, or it can't move it back to where it needs to. Stuff like that. So running compression waveform we'll do next. Okay, so what I'm gonna do next is do running compression and comparing both banks. I did do one earlier just with bank 1 in cylinder number 3, and then individually I did one on that. But what I want to do, and I did save those, but what I want to do to show you guys is both simultaneously. That way I can get them both up on the screen, both at once, just to be able to display and show you the differences bank to bank. And that will give you a pretty good clear picture of what's well, it'll show you a good picture of what's going on inside the engine bank to bank. So I should be all good set up to crank it up and let it run. Add a vacuum leak there. Just letting it run. It sounds pretty crappy right now. Okay, so I just did running compression, both banks. Simultaneous. Let's see if we can pull something up. Red trace is it's going to be your bank 1, which is the faulty bank. We're primarily looking at your intake valve opening area. Somewhere around that point, looks like. Showing about 581. It's 41 degrees. Alright. 585. Bank 2, no good. This is after unplugging and plugging in the cam sensor. Oddly enough, it seems to have brought bank 1 pretty close comparable to bank 2. Well, both seem to be about a degree or two off of what measuring now as far as intake valve opening. Bank 1 seems to be cooperating how it should. Now the only difference is I did this off camera, obviously, of course, go figure, but I unplugged both intake cam sensors. This one and this one back here. Was looking at pin wire colors, actually was gonna begin to start tapping into the signal line, compare them bank to bank as another forms of like I said, confirmation or overkill, or watching the cam movements bank to bank. And I forgot that I left it unplugged when I did one of these rounds of running compressions, along with this purge line that where I was tapped in for the intake pulses. I left that off too, so one of the captures was not fully accurate. This one I heard while it was running, plugged it back in. This one I totally forgot about it until I stopped one of the captures and I happened to look over, or actually I was beginning to take the compression hose out. Actually I didn't have them out, and then I seen it, and then I wasn't very happy, because that was partially why it took so long to get it cranking and running, which makes sense now. So I plugged that back in, I put the hoses back in, re-ran the running compression to try to get a good capture like I had earlier this afternoon, which luckily I did save those because it shows how bad bank to bank it was. The only thing different is I didn't do it simultaneously. I did them individually. First I ran bank 1, captured that, then I ran bank 2 and I captured that. So I can pull those up and show you how far off. It was about 20 degrees off bank to bank. Then I tried to do it simultaneously, but during that point that was unplugged and it was all skewed. Wanted to get it good setup and simultaneous, and in doing so now at this point it is acting quote unquote normal, or at least here on the captures the control of the opening of the intake valves seems to be comparable side to side. Was there something wrong with that? I don't know. What I'm gonna do is put the plugs and coils back in, let it run normally, see how that changes, if anything. And I'd be very, very surprised if unplugging and plugging that back in takes care of what was going on. I know you've heard it time after time, actually, and I've heard it in classes and training and throughout experience. Sometimes you just randomly happen to fix things by unplugging things, and it sucks but don't suck. But I don't know if on this one if it's actually really fixed. All I know is I'm seeing different readings on this bank compared to what I was earlier. So, and even then I don't even know if I would call it a fix, but we know there's something going on, because that's the only thing that was different. It was run with that unplugged and now plugged back in. Let me get this set up. I'm going to clear, I know I've set a bunch of codes. I'm going to clear all that, kind of start it from fresh, let it think and assume if this is acting normal or reading normal or gonna act normal. I want it all with fresh, no codes in the DME. Okay, so I got this put back together, plugs, coils back in, everything connected. Now we'll go back inside, go through the process of trying to clear all the codes that I'm sure I've set. Okay, so yeah, 3 and 5, 3 and 5, Not sure what that is. Cause that. Not surprised about that. It's bank 1. We'll go ahead and clear it. No codes. See how it runs. Oh, I still feel a little bit of a stumble out there. Cylinder 1 is counting up. Oh, now number 4 is a trouble child. Okay. Let me make sure I got him plugged in. Oh, we've got a trouble code right away. Okay, so now we're getting a steady cylinder number 4. Plugged in. Alright. Well, the magic cam sensor didn't do anything. I bet you if I hook everything back up, that bank 1 timing control is going to be way off. And kind of makes sense. For some reason it decides to pick one of the cylinders on that bank and have them display as the active one. Okay, so what I did was get printouts of both banks of when I took the captures of both of them individually, one at a time, and I've got them printed out here. This bottom one is the bank 2. This one is bank 1. The main point, well, there was a couple of points of reference to look at, but as I was saying beforehand, the intake valve closing is the one I was paying attention to, or stood out, or jumped out. This on the known good bank, it's on this cursor here, which is at the 577 after the 540 mark, which I've got it a few different points labeled, but that would be intake valve closed. This is bank 2, so it's 37 degrees after bottom dead center. This bank 1, and you can tell also this here is your divider, your ruler, and then you've got this one, which is where bank 2 closes, and then off delayed to the right on bank 1 is where that one closes, which is at 618. So that's 78 degrees after bottom dead center. That is a big spread, and you can visually see it here. Here's your ruler, and that much distance. ruler and just after the that small distance. So that's the first, like I said, thing that stood out as I was able to see, along with the compression amount. This one on the bad bank, it peaked out at somewhere around the 63 psi, and then this good bank, this one, it actually cut off there somewhere around, a guesstimation around 93 psi. So clearly a difference in compression pressure while running. Also, the things that were a little I guess surprising is other just quick reference points that I checked when I was looking at this. So the intake valve opening, and also this deep full vacuum pull in the amount of time, and both for these reference points were pretty darn close. That point at reaching the full vacuum after top dead center for both, I got somewhere around 60 on the bad bank and about 55, so that's not too disturbing. And then the intake valve opening, 32 on the bad and 38 on the good. That's still fairly close. Again, there's variables because of where I take the measurement from. So both of those readings, surprisingly, are fairly close and comparable. But then makes sense, like where I was doing the cranking no start and I was measuring intake pulls. The intake pulls during cranking was what was really being affected, and along with the lower compression with showing up on relative compression. So, and also here on running compression, we can clearly see the what's being affected, or what's going on, is a difference in intake valve. I would say, I keep saying timing or timing control. So, but there's a little more that I want to look at. Okay, so I'm all set up to do the ECM inputs, crank sensor and both intake cam sensors, and I'm also adding the relative compression, and I'm gonna do a crank no start, just because I know I can capture bank 1 failing during cranking, and I can see that with the relative compression probe, and I want for sure capture and see when that bank is failing. I want to see what both intake cam sensors are doing, because in theory, if with most bank-to-bank engines, both intake cam sensors should overlay each other pretty much identical if the engine is in time. So I want to crank it, get it to fail, see that point on the relative compression, and then I pay attention to where bank 1 intake cam signal trace lines up. If it shifts when the cylinders drop out, or if it stays matching, or what. So that's what I'm doing. I'm all set up. I should be ready to just go ahead and crank. Hopefully we can get a good enough capture. Okay, so there's that capture that we just gathered. There's the two cranking scenarios. And this one actually came out really good because if you can see this whole beginning up to about this point, from here on after, we had normal looking relative compression for a very decent extended amount of time. I think probably the longest I've been able to capture. And then we get that drop off point. So it's perfect to monitor or check what the cam sensors did. So there's awesome looking relative compression, probably like I said, the best I've been able to gather, and that's a you know, quote unquote ideal or normal one. The red is going to be your the crank sensor, so the CKP. Which looks kind of oddballish. I'm wondering if my connections are not proper. Yeah. Damn. That sucks. But I guess for cam sensor wise, well, let's lower the crank since it's bad signal. And then you've got both cam sensors there. Now, they look pretty lined up, overlaid. Nothing that would be too crazy. And then here is that point. Here's your dropouts of cylinders, and there is no shift on bank 1 cam. Which makes no sense, because we know from the printouts that I've got that the intake valve bank to bank closes at different times. So you would think that the one cam, I think the green one, would shift when it's faulty, and it's not shifting. It just makes no sense. The cam phaser in the front is attached to the cam, and when it phases, it moves the shaft, which then the pulse wheel is attached to the shaft on the rear, and it's not showing any type of movement. It's staying in the same place. Both cams are in the same spot, whether it's building good compression or not. Let's look at the other packet. And this one right away started off with bad compressions. It was kind of good here in the beginning, but then almost right away it starts to drop out. So you can see there's no shift on the cam. So now we're back to can we legitimately tell the customer, because he called earlier, can we legitimately tell him that we have a cam, or that we have a timing issue, a phaser issue, a chain issue, a timing issue? It's, you know, I questioned myself, because prior to this one, I did just these two without any reference earlier in the day, and that's when I started really questioning myself, because up to this point I had not checked the cam signals because of how much of obvious physicalness readings I was getting from this and the in-cylinder and the breathing transducer. And once I did this late here in the game, which I'm kind of glad I did, because if I would have checked this, I don't know which route I would have gone, thinking it was fine. But it makes sense that there's no timing correlation codes, I guess. The shaft itself is in time. But when I spoke to the customer and he asked me to get him an estimate to do the phaser and chains and just whatever possibly would be needed to go in there, so, you know, the oil control valve or the solenoid for the phaser, it came out to be a pretty significant number. And any time prior to me giving any type of crazy estimate, whether it's a crazy DME, ECU, or a mechanical repair or something like that, I always make sure that I'm 100% sure, and that whatever we're going to go into repair is going to rectify the problem. So I came back out here after I gathered that estimate, and I took this, and it is not out of time. So now I'm back to being puzzled, back to square one, and back to things don't make sense. And that's where I'm at, and that's where I wanted to add more channels to this, and then this is where we're at. Okay, so back to this Porsche. After looking at the graph that didn't make sense, I was doing some research, and on these vehicles they have a system also that controls intake valve lift, not timing, but lift, and it has two separate intake lobes on the camshaft, very similar to what everyone probably knows VTEC. It has a high cam lobe and this low cam lobe, and the high one is used for higher RPM, more power, and the low one is for idling and low cruising situation. Now, the way they do it is with hydraulic, also hydraulic pressure, switching over a piston, sliding it over into and the assembly is inside the buckets or the lifters. It's got a bucket style. I don't have a picture of it, but I did come across, which when I was trying to poke the crank sensor, and I looked up right there at that black connector, that's a solenoid. And there's two of them, one on the back of each head, and this one, it's really difficult to get eyes on, but the I started doing research and I pulled up wire diagrams, and I was a little confused because when I was doing the earlier testings and I was trying to check to see if the cam, phase, or solenoid was being controlled equally on both banks, I saw what was 4 solenoids, and it didn't make sense to me. And that's the ones down here. 1, 2, 3, 4. You got bank 1, bank 1, bank 2, bank 2. So I wasn't too sure what was going on with that. This is going into, not being 100% familiar with the type of setup system they have for their engine. Completely understanding everything. Up to this point, I was just checking everything physically and trying to see what was going on with it when it was going bad. So the ones that earlier that I tapped into were these 2. That's for the cam phaser, and then these that say lift adjusters. Those are the ones that are in the back of the head. So I started doing some digging, this and that, and it turns out that they are also changing the lift of the actual valve along with the phasing, and that is where our problem lies. There is something going on with bank 1 lift control system, because we do not have any sort of camshaft shift bank to bank when it is good or when it is bad. That's all the same, which makes sense. There's no correlation codes going on. There's something going on with the lift control system on bank 1, and it drops out all of bank 1. As far as exactly what it is, I don't know yet, and I'm trying to come up with a game plan of if there's a way where I can break down the system either hydraulically or it works off that electronic solenoid also, which will control the oil being either sent or relieved on that piston to lock the bucket for the high cam or low cam. So the thing that sucks about it is that bank 1 solenoid or anything related to it on the back of that head is real difficult to get to and access. Bank 2 is out wide in the open. It's a little bit hard to reach, but you can see it and there's nothing in the way. It's not as, if it was easy to do, I probably would have swapped solenoid side to side, seeing if it's just a simple solenoid, or if it was easy to tap into maybe like an oil port, or simply even accessing the connector harness to be able to tap into it and check the control of those solenoids, see if it drops out or if both are still being commanded equally the same, like how I did with the front phaser solenoids. There's a lot of things I could try to do. The thing that sucks, it's hard to get to, and access to it is difficult. But I believe, and I am more 100% secure now with knowing exactly what's going on, as opposed to kind of guesstimating and saying they're thinking that it was a phaser problem. Even because if you look up there's bulletins and stuff about the phaser bolts and stuff coming loose, stuff like that. But after I saw this, after I gave or was about to give an estimate, or realizing the amount of expense, I wanted to make sure, and seeing this made me 100% sure that it's not a chain timing issue or a phaser issue, and there's no need to open up that front section of the engine and for me to waste my time tearing all that apart, put it all back together, and still get this result. I would have been really upset, pissed off, and customer spending money where he does not need to, and that's not what I like to do. I don't like to be incorrect. I try to go as deep as I can to give 100% accuracy, and I at least know what is going on to a certain extent. Everything that didn't make sense makes sense now that it didn't make sense. As far as what is making it do this, I don't know yet. Is it simply just a solenoid? I could only maybe hope. It's just too difficult right now to figure out a testing method. I think the only thing I'm going to be able to do is try, and I'm saying try, to tap into the control wire for the solenoids, bank to bank, check the activation during cranking when this drops out. If both activations bank to bank stay the same, at least the control is equal and both banks should run the same. Other than that, I think I could probably only try to suggest the solenoid. Wanted to get you guys some sort of update. I was not able to get any type of solenoid measurement for the lift control solenoids that are in the back of the cylinder heads. What I ended up doing, just getting with the customer, letting them know the possibilities of a solenoid causing the everything that is going on with it. They said go ahead and attempt to replace it and see if that rectifies the situation. So what I decided to do, as much of a pain as it is to get to the solenoids, I did end up deciding to do swapping them from bank to bank. I did not get any footage of that. I kind of needed to get it done quick today to be able to know if I need to order one or if that is not going to fix the problem. So it was done through the day today. It was not fun. Bank 2 was way easier. You can get to it from the bottom fairly easy. Everything is clear. You can see it. You can get reach up there and get the bolts out. This bank 1 was just terrible to do. I had to do it from up top. Couldn't get to it from the bottom, and it's buried back down behind the head. Another problem with it though, I was finally able to unplug it and get the bolts out for the solenoid, and once I went ahead and tried to pull the solenoid out, it would not pull out. It would get stuck, and turns out that silver body right there with this hose, that is your vacuum pump for your brake booster. The brake booster had to be removed. I mean, not brake booster, the vacuum pump had to be removed in order to be able to pull the solenoid all the way out, because the solenoid would only come out a certain amount but then hit the body of the vacuum pump. So that vacuum pump had to be removed to get the solenoid out. Once I did that, I had already removed that solenoid from bank 2, popped that on in here, put the vacuum pump back on, bolted up the solenoid, plugged it back in, then installed that one, plugged it in, and I went ahead and set up my trace on ignition cylinder 1. I was only going to do a cranking relative compression test with this tracer to be able to capture with the starter draw for when the whichever bank would drop out. Now, I did 2 cranking measurements all on the same capture, and as you can see, I went ahead and cranked it here, let it cool from it, and cranked it again. We're on the first initial crank, and as you can see, this was actually a very long extended crank. It was actually the full time until it shut itself down. All cylinders were normal looking. Obviously you got this one that looks a little low, but compared to the whole capture, it was definitely the only time I think I was able to get full compression, good compression humps on all cylinders. Now, like I said, it shut down on itself to cool the starter down. Went ahead and I cranked it again, and that's when I started to get the bad situation reoccurring. As you can see, it started off a little normal and then it dropped out like it normally would. Red trace is ignition 1, so each time, like before that hits, that's cylinder 1. Now you can clearly see what we've got going on here. It's different than before. Cylinder 1 right here, good pressure buildup, and then I'm going based on the firing order. So 1 and 3 were good. 7 drops out. 2 is good. 6 and 5 are bad. 4 is good. 8 is bad. Back to number 1. All the bad ones now are on bank 2. All the good ones are bank 1. All we did was swap out that solenoid bank to bank, and the fault did move. Now we have 100% for sure, data, evidence, whatever you want to call it, to determine and make a call with confidence as far as what was making this engine run bad and making the whole bank drop out. Bad, faulty lift control solenoid, originally on bank 1. I've got one ordered. It was not in stock, which was part of why I had to kind of rush, get that swapped out, as bad of a job as it was. But I can go ahead and know that we're going to pay for a solenoid without having it go to waste, and because we do know that's going to rectify the problem. Customer, I still didn't tell him. Once I get it installed, put all the panels back on, sensor will be here tomorrow, but I'm sure the customer is going to be extremely happy. I'm definitely 100% happy. I didn't make the wrong call. I decided to go further into checking the thing that made me go further was checking both camshaft sensors when the thing dropped out. This capture in particular, this is the one that was I think the most important one. Well, they were all important, seeing that there was, the valve timing issue, blah blah blah, but knowing that it wasn't a cam shaft shifting situation, that's the one that made me go further and gave me that funny feeling that a phaser probably was not going to be it. And just super glad that I decided to go further, find out about the other lift control system, and glad that I decided to just do a swap bank to bank. So overall, all in all, this one is pretty much a guaranteed fix. Definitely another crazy cool one. capturing all different things to gather your evidence and stuff like that to be able to make the 100% guaranteed call, especially on a vehicle like this caliber, this you know, price range, whatever you want to call it. You just want to make sure you're making the right call. So hope you guys liked it. I definitely had fun on it. I thought it was super cool. Definitely learned a lot about this engine, this system. And then it's just another one that you get done with a good arrow right on target. So on to the next one after this. Not sure if I'll get a shot of the actual solenoid replacement. I might, but if not, that's all that this one was.